they think that you hate them because you hate dad and they're
Mm-hmm.
50% dad. So you must hate half of them. Hi everyone, welcome to the Lead from Love podcast. I am Yalini, I am your host and love coach. Now in today's episode, we are going to talk about how you can navigate co-parenting relationships and moving from a place of conflict to collaboration. So if you or someone you know is going through a challenging time through divorce, co-parenting challenges, this episode is for you. And today, to help me talk about this conversation or talk about this topic, I have JP Marsh. Now, JP is a single dad to a 9-year-old girl. He has navigated this space himself with his ex, and he's gone from a space of conflict to collaboration to the point where he now has a blended family situation where they go on holidays together, they do school functions and sporting activities, and it hasn't always been easy. So to get his wisdom and his advice, here we have JP Marsh. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Now, JP, you have a really interesting story. I know we spoke about it very briefly when we last caught up. And please, I'd love you to share what happened in your previous relationship, because to get to this space where you get to go on holidays together, I imagine it wasn't always this easy.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, it never is at the beginning. Or, you know, it gets easier when you can reframe the way that you see the other person more than anything else. When you stop looking at them like your ex or the person that hurt your feelings or broke your heart or, all of those things, it makes it a little bit easier to sort of embrace your new life and your new reality and just kind of start going forward with it rather than, being in the stuck place of, whatever emotional baggage that you're going to be carrying around. Once you can sort of sift through that emotional baggage and kind of let some of that go, it's easier to start moving forward when you're not dragging a bunch of weight behind you.
Yeah, I like that, because often when we're stuck in the emotional space, it almost becomes combative. If it's me versus you, you hurt me, you walked away, you ended this, and that can make it really difficult to come to a place where you can work together. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so important. I mean, normally in a relationship, when it ends, you can sort of separate and walk away. But when you've got a kid or children, it really does force you to have to come back together, and you have to speak
Mm-hmm.
to each other. You're going to be in one another's lives.
Right.
How long did it take you to get from a place of carrying the emotional baggage of the end of the relationship to actually being able to go, okay, I need to look at this through a different lens to be able to make this work?
I mean, it took me a little longer than I wish it would have, but once I left my own pity party and started becoming the person that I, just like in a relationship setting, once I became or started to become the person that I wanted the other person to be towards me, then everything started kind of getting a lot easier. But once I let go of the baggage and just, the relationship's dead, grieve it, let it go. She's not my ex anymore. She's my daughter's mother. Quit feeling sorry for yourself. Quit being defensive and, getting in these stupid arguments or letting her push my buttons and then in turn turning around and poking at her because I know what's going to push her buttons.
Mm.
But mostly, once I got out of my own way, everything kind of just leveled itself out. I mean, obviously, you got to do work on yourself and pay attention to what your triggers are and figure out what the motives behind what you're being triggered by really are. You know what I mean? Like I was getting instantly defensive and being triggered by things that really wasn't her poking at me. It was just me being defensive because I didn't want to deal with the anger or the resentment or the hurt feelings and that kind of stuff. So, but it took about a year and a half. But I was dealing with,
Yeah.
you know, I had moved in with my parents because, I moved out. So what do you do when you're starting over? Obviously you got to go back home and sort of rebuild from scratch. And like 3 weeks later, my dad died unexpectedly.
Oh, I'm
And so then
sorry.
that spun me into another circle. But then I got kind of sort of into a depressive funk, right? Because I was trying to grieve the relationship, trying to grieve my dad, but also stuck in the place where my mom's grieving and can't escape. Like, I have a brother, he was able to go home and not be constantly stuck in this sort of place. And so in my case, there was a fair amount of pity party going on, you know, between the relationship, my dad being stuck where I didn't want to be, and just, poor me, this always happens, blah, 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 blah. And then when I started actively changing the way I perceive the world and changing my reality and the way that the world was around me, as everything was getting better, once I, obviously identified my triggers, identified the things that were setting me off or the things I didn't want to be, really looked in the mirror and figured out the kind of dad I wanted to be rather than dude that lives at home raising his daughter. You know what I mean? Like trying to break
Mm,
generational curses and identifying things that I didn't want to pass down to my daughter, and looking through the lens of what's best for her, regardless of my personal feelings in that situation. And so once you can sort of just get out of your own way and quit looking through a looking glass at the situations clouded by emotion, and be able to make decisions and have conversations that are difficult or not conversations that you are wanting to have but need to have, and you can start to see what's best for your kids. You know what I mean? Instead of what's going to either satisfy me to hurt that person or instantly get defensive because I think they're picking on me, or, whatever the case may be.
yeah. I love the identity shift that is important to
Mm-hmm.
have in that, because yes, there are things that we all need to work on within ourselves, especially when we're going through a breakup and the end of a relationship and grieving that. But really shifting the focus from me versus the ex to what kind of dad do I want to be?
Right.
And moving away from she's my ex to she's the mother of my child. It puts a completely different
Right.
spin on the way that you experience the situation. And I think sometimes that's what's really helpful in helping us move out of our emotions. Now, you can't bypass your emotions. You still have to feel all the feelings and go through
Right.
the process to actually get to the other side. And so that's okay. But there are still certain actions that need to happen because there is a child or children at the center of this. And I think sometimes we lose focus on
Yeah.
that when we're caught up in our own grief and our own pain. And so remembering why we need to be able to navigate this sometimes is about returning to the children and who we need to be as, or who you need to be as a parent to be able to show up for them. Because I'm sure you experienced that it's challenging. It would have been challenging for your daughter as well.
Mm-hmm. Your kids are going to be like you, whether you want to admit it or not. Right. And so if you want to be petty and nitpick a bunch of small details that really have no influence on everyday life, you know what I mean? Just to bicker and just to fight and just to do these things, you can take a step back and watch your kids interact with other kids and see if they're taking those tendencies. And then really just try to figure out if it's, if that's the way if you enjoy your life and enjoy living your life that way, then continue to do it. But most people probably don't want to live in chaos all the time and constantly be in high conflict situations and arguing about nothing and bickering back and forth because you didn't drop off the t-shirt I asked for. And so now it's a 4-day fight back and forth. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't
It
help
sounds
anybody. What is it?
exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's exhausting just to have the upper hand or just to be right or just to have a sense that you want to fight because maybe that'll make you feel a little bit better because it causes you so much pain and suffering in between and so much anxiety and so much
Yeah.
stress, which then, kids absorb. And as you said, I mean, I think that sometimes it's a hard pill to swallow that they end up just like you. And so if you don't want them to be
Right.
petty, it's about leading by example.
I guess, a lot of it is you try to figure out, you know, we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we have. And so the more tools that you can find and acquire and build off of, then the more you're able to take on different situations and take on different scenarios. And, one of the things that I'd came across years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, that's always kind of stuck with me, I sort of live by the 5-second rule or the rule of five. If I'm not going to think about it 5 years from now, I'm not going to spend more than 5 seconds worrying about it today. And it just takes away so much unnecessary anxiety. And, how much did the average person spends the majority of their day worried about something that's not going to matter next year, next month, next week. And when you're doing that, it's hard to be present in the situations that you're in. And so if you're not present in the situations that you're in, are your reactions actually reacting to the situation that you're in? Or is it clouded by the anxiety or worry about something that's probably not even real? So then if you're already worried about everything, then it's easier to be kind of set off by things that just shouldn't even matter in the moment because you're only halfway in the moment. And I didn't want to, but at the same time, I didn't want to miss out on my daughter's life either by being in my own head all the time or being worried about things in the future that probably are not going to work out the way that I might have 10 different scenarios go through my mind and have, the 10 reactions. Like I went through all 10 of those scenarios. And then when you get into that actual scenario, none of those 10 were how it went down. And so you just went through the stress and anxiety of 10 meetings or 10 interactions that never even happened that way. And so it's all just wasted time to me.
Yeah, it's so true. So much of that, your anxiety really comes down to your imagination because it's worrying about something that you're imagining might happen in your mind as opposed to what's actually happening in front of you. And,
Mm-hmm.
I like the rule of if it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 seconds thinking about it. But oh my gosh, is that so much easier said than done? Because similarly, most
Right.
people don't enter a breakup thinking, I'm going to make this really difficult and I'm going to increase the amount of suffering we both go through. And I think we would like to think that if we're ever in that situation, that we want to engage with that in the most mature, adult like and loving way possible and that we're going to be really great through it. But it can be so challenging in those moments when you're in the
Mm-hmm.
reality of that pain, especially if it's unforeseen. So how do you navigate it? How do you make that transition through the shift in identity and refocusing on your child? How do you then start to create that relationship with your ex-partner?
Mindfulness training helped a lot for me. The being aware, being in the moment, not getting caught up in things that, being able to kind of step back and see everything for what it is, or, you know, taking a lot of the emotion out of things. If things came up, but it's a habit. So chaos is a habit. High conflict is a habit. Poking buttons, pushing other people, trying to get arise out of them. It's living in chaos or living in anxiety or living in depression. It's all habit formed, and so you have to start training yourself to get out of the habit, just like going to the gym or just like eating healthy or just like you know quitting smoking or any habits that you want to change. But I for me the easiest, or the thing that I focused on first, was breaking the habit of sweating the small stuff.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like if my daughter's mother was having a bad day and it came through in text when she sent me something, I don't have to engage in that. And so you're given a choice. I can either fire back something and then have a 30 text or a 20-minute phone call of back and forth and it goes nowhere, because I really sat down and I was like, these stupid fights are not getting us anywhere. Nothing's going forward. And so
Yeah.
if it's not working out, then why do you continue to do it? Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. If
Yeah.
if you know the other person, obviously, because you have a child with them, you were either married or in a relationship or dated, whatever the case may be, but that, I knew that my daughter's mother, if I could tell that she was upset or irritated or having a bad day and it came through in text and I could read it and knew that that's what was going on, it wouldn't matter how rational I was, it's going to escalate, because no matter what I say, it's not going to be right. You know what I mean? So I quit engaging in those conversations. She'd send something, I'd just send okay. Nope. Yes. No, thank you. I don't need to go in a big story. I don't need to add fuel into that fire. You don't have to. There's nothing in the court papers, there's nothing in life that says that you have to argue with people who are going to be irrational and can't problem solve. Let them get out of that headspace, and then you can have a real adult conversation about how to move forward with whatever that scenario is. People aren't going to be able to listen.
Oh, it's so true, because we're caught up in our emotions. And so our rational thinking brain is taking a back seat to all of the emotions that are flooding our body. But there are two things that you're implying in that approach that I really love. One is that when you're getting a message that might be irritating or triggering, often the reaction is to assume that it's about us. They're attacking me. It's about me. And actually, it might be about them. It might be that they've had a bad day, that they're stressed and they're overwhelmed. And so it's about taking a step back in that mindfulness. You're doing two things. One, you're going, maybe it's not about me. Maybe it's their stuff. So I'm not going to engage in that. And two, it's about remembering that you have a choice. Often we feel like when something happens, our emotions and our actions happen automatically. But yeah, okay, you're going to have an emotional reaction, but you have a choice in the way that you then take an action in response. And so taking a step back is, okay, one, it might not be about me. And two, I also don't have to engage in this. And that's how you then step forward to make a more productive decision that saves you so much time and energy.
Sometimes it's just misunderstanding too. Because one of the scenarios that I used to get upset about, right? And this is how irrational it can get, and people have no idea. So we'd been split up for a year or more, and then there was certain weekdays where I'd pick my daughter up after I got off work, right? Working in construction, sometimes you get off work at 4, sometimes you're done at 5, sometimes you're done at 8. I mean, it just depends on what you're doing that day and or that week.
Yeah.
And so I would always almost get a text around, midday, noon, something, and it would just kind of say, "What time are you planning on picking Adeline up tonight?" So me, in my feelings and defensiveness, would instantly just be like, "When I get off work." You know what I mean? And that's kind of the snappy thing I would say to her. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know when I get done doing what I need to get done today, da, 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 you know?
So you felt hassled.
But then, right. But then the reality of it was, if I get home, if I pick her up before 5 p.m., her mom, my daughter's mother, can make whatever she wants for dinner because she doesn't have to worry about whether or not my daughter will eat it. But if I'm going to be
Yeah.
later than 5 p.m., then she's got to plan something for dinner to feed them both because I'm not going to be there for dinner time to pick her up, and she won't eat dinner with me. So, like, she's not hounding me. I got no reason to be defensive, and it has nothing to do with me. And she's not even mad about, if I say 7 p.m., it doesn't matter. She just says, okay. But, even when I would say that to her and she would just reply, okay, then I'm like, oh, well, now she's pissed. Why are you pissed? And then
Yeah.
and then it just keeps snowballing from there. And then by the time I get there to pick my daughter up, then, I get the mean scowl, and it's a big, standoff kind of deal. But the reality of it was, she's trying to figure out if she can make something that my daughter doesn't want to eat because she doesn't have to feed her that night, feed her dinner that night, and I'll take her to dinner or feed her. Or the other way, she's got to, plan dinner around something that a 4-year-old will eat as opposed to
Yeah.
not. But that's what
Yeah.
happens when you get in that habit of being emotional and being and seeing everything through this defensive, hurt, mad lens, that you misinterpret very basics, minimal things that really don't even need to really be a conversation, into like this big thing every week.
Ah, yeah, I can say that. And it just snowballs from there because, like you said, we're looking through a different lens. We're looking through the lens of pain as though we're going to be attacked. And so, you attack back. It's a defense mechanism. So I'm curious to make that shift. Is that just a decision you had to make for yourself and then you started showing up differently with each interaction? Or did you end up having to have a sit down conversation with your ex and go, look, I've been in this dark place. I know I haven't showed up in a way that was productive and I want to make a change. Did you have to clear the air on certain issues before you could actually move from conflict to collaboration? Or was it just in the day to day steps that you took and you didn't have to have a bigger conversation around it?
uh I guess a bit of both. More of just the day to day, because, like all relationships, at the point that, a marriage dissolves or a relationship dissolves, words don't really mean anything anymore, and so it's all action, right? Same as when you're getting ready to break up, and the other person says, well, I'm going to quit Instagram, or says, I'm going to quit drinking, or I'm not going out with my mates every weekend anymore. I'm going to change. One more chance. I'm going to change. I'm going to change. And you've heard it a million times, same as I've said it a million times, and everybody else has probably said it a million times. So you're going to show up better, and they're going to believe more of it through actions, right? Which is the little things that matter. Are you on time? If they need something, are you available to do it? Are you sitting around with your friends and family constantly beating that person down to where the kids end up overhearing it and take it home and relay information? It's these little things that you showing up, just like showing up for yourself, makes a bigger difference than, I could say I'm going to start working out tomorrow morning, but if I don't work out tomorrow morning, then I let myself down and I feel like shit all day. Whereas,
Yeah.
same as hitting the snooze button on your alarm clock. I said I was going to wake up at this time, and I hit snooze 4 times. And so, like, you're just letting yourself down. And if that's it, you have to be able to integrate it into all aspects of your life, right? You can't just show up as a parent and then keep doing all these other and not show up for yourself. But as you are there and present, the other person can't deny it. And you don't need to, it's same as business. You don't need to advertise what you're doing to everybody around you. Because if you're doing what you should be doing and doing what you, if you're showing up, if you're at the soccer games, you're at the school functions, you're at the birthday parties, you're dropping them off on time, you're picking them up on time, you're not the one missing the school bag and not making lunches and not doing this, and the less that they have to follow you around and see that you're showing up, and less not having to make sure that you're not leaving all these bits and pieces out, the easier it's going to get, because you're taking a lot of pressure off of them. They don't have to parent you and the child. And so it becomes it becomes a lot more collaborative. And one thing that I did, and I was always pretty good about, the little things don't matter, and I mean, day-to-day adulting is not my strong suit. It's not something that I'm naturally good at, and I work on it, and I have to put a lot of work into it. My daughter's mother knows this, obviously. And so she will give me a rundown of 3 months of, their plans of, camping trips, vacations, dance recitals coming up later this month, all these different things. Because if I don't get it in my calendar on my phone, I'm not going to remember. And so she is good about reminding me. I know that I'm not good about it. I still used to get really mad at her for doing it. But it was a lot easier to just thank her. Thanks for reminding me. Like, that I'm not good at it. I know that I'm not good at it. I got to stop thinking that you're picking on me for it, and understand that you were actually just helping me. But also, it just made it easier because she was more willing to help me. The more I was willing to just accept that help rather than get mad about that help. Yeah. And, being available without judgment is the key part. We always had a deal that we gave each other first call. So if it was her weekend, something came up, she would call me first to see if I had anything going on. But with that, if I had something going on, there was no judgment from her. She would just then call her parents, my parents, somebody to watch them. Also, if I did take my daughter 2 months later, next month, something, there was no repercussions from it. She can have a life, I can have a life. If I'm not otherwise engaged doing something, it was no big deal to take my daughter extra time. I get extra time for my daughter. Who doesn't love that? But at the same time, you have to get in a place where you're not throwing it in each other's faces all the time, which happens a lot. You can't double standard everything. If I can have a life, she can have a life. If I can do whatever I want when I don't have my daughter, she can do whatever she wants when she doesn't have my daughter. But also the little things of, like, you don't need to be driving by her house. The clearer the boundaries were, and the less that anybody's stepping over boundaries, the easier it is to just collaborate on things, because you're not throwing things in each other's face all the time or bringing up things that really are none of the other person's business.
Yeah, so it's really about stepping into a new identity. It was really about creating a new relationship. And it has to have trust, like all good relationships. And it's about being a team, just in a new dynamic. And, I love this because so far we're talking about who you need to become. Well, one, what the consequence is for yourself of not showing up, and the pain and the suffering and the stress and the anxiety, everyday fighting. And then having to step out of your old identity. Instead of being the ex or the wounded person or sitting in the baggage and the pain, it's about going, okay, well, I need to show up as a parent now. And instead of seeing them as the ex and potentially the ex that hurt me, it's about seeing them as the other parent, the parent of your child. And then how do you work together? Right. How do you support one another? Because if you show up for them, they're also going to show up for you. And the biggest part of this puzzle piece is that although there are so many benefits to both yourself and to her and the way that you can interact together now, the biggest benefit is your daughter. Because what are the consequences when you aren't able to show up in a healthy, kind, respectful way? I mean, one of the things you said is your kids become you. And if you're petty, they become petty. But also, they're
Hmm.
going through the emotional turmoil of their parents splitting up.
Right.
And so then to go from, hopefully at one point a loving home to a circumstance where their parents aren't together anymore, and now it's vengeful or spiteful or hurtful, that has deeper layers of ramifications. I think
Having two
something that,
parents that are working together, you're not splitting your kid. You know what I mean? Because if dad hates mom, mom hates dad, I'm 50% of each. Then that means dad hates half of me and mom hates half of me. But then when I'm at dad's house, I can't act like I love my mom or ever want to talk to my mom because I don't want to upset dad because I don't want to hurt dad's feelings. But then also, there's a completely different personality that shifts off at mom's house because I don't want to tell mom I miss dad or I love dad because mom's mad at dad. So then now you got a kid growing up with two personalities that aren't theirs with an underlining feeling that their parents on both parents dislike half of them. And then when you get to be about 18, 20 years old and move out on your own, you've been raised in chaos and conflict. So what do you know? You know chaos and conflict. What kind of relationship are you going to get into?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, your parents also model how to have a relationship. So if they grow up thinking that a relationship is mum hates dad and dad hates mum, then that's what they go out and recreate in the world. But something that you said, which really resonated with me and I think is so powerful and shocking, is if your parents hate each other and you're 50% each of them, then how can they love you because they hate half of you?
Right.
And that is an overwhelmingly sad thing to realize that a child might interpret things that way. So for you to actually say you love them and for them to believe it, you have to then be loving to your ex or be respectful to them
Yeah.
for them
Well,
to
and it,
accept that love.
if you're talking about the downstream effects of all these different things on the kids, the perception from a lot of people is, well, when my kids are adults, I don't have to deal with that other person anymore. They're high conflict. It's all them. It's not me. Blah 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 blah. Right?
Yeah.
Except at graduation, who's gonna be there? At the wedding, who's gonna be there? If the parents can't be in the same room or can't even get along, who's gonna miss out on the wedding? Who's gonna miss out on the birth of grandkids? Who's gonna miss out on grandkids' birthdays? Who's gonna miss out on graduations? Because if you can't be around each other, one person's getting left out.
Yeah. Oh, it
Or
doesn't end when they're 18.
you have the super stressful chaos of constant shifting around. We're pretty easy. I mean, a lot of the, summer holidays when everybody's barbecuing, that kind of stuff, we'll do 4th of July's or Independence Day, the Memorial weekends, unless they go camping or this and that, and it's no big deal if we can all be around each other. And the Christmases, my daughter and I went down to Arizona where my mom lives and spent Christmas with my mom. My daughter's a New Year's baby, so her mom was like, "Yeah, we don't have anything planned for Christmas. If your mom wants you guys to come down, da 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 da, go for it. Just be back by her birthday so that we can do, her birthday, da da da." But there's no, you know, okay, well, Christmas at mom's house from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then you're going to dad's house from 9:30, 10 o'clock to noon. And then you got to go to grandparents' house from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And then we're going to shift you over to the next grandparents' house from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock to do Christmas. What fun is that? What kind of Christmas is that?
Yeah. It's everyone wanting a piece, but the child actually just not being able to actually enjoy a day.
Right.
Oh, there are so many ripple effects. We've had a previous conversation once, and there's something that you said that I found really interesting. And it's that if you haven't dealt with the breakup, then your child stops being a child and essentially becomes your parent or your emotional crutch.
Right. Right. They grow up. They become, your kid's not your therapist or your best friend or your venting, you know what I mean? Like you don't need to vent your frustrations with the other parent to your child. You know what I mean?
I
And
feel like something that you just said might be
so,
triggering to some people, where you said your child is not your best friend. Can you elaborate on that?
right. It's hard, it's a fine line, right? And you see it, it tends to be more gender specific. So it'd be more like on the, in my experience, the mothers with daughters that stay single or mostly single date, and what, when they're like in high school, the daughter sort of turns into a friend, right? Which means mom's house has no rules. Mom's house doesn't da 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 da, and this and that and this and that and this and that.
Mm.
And then daughter never wants to go to dad's house because dad's house is structured. Maybe dad got remarried. That, you know what I mean? And these kinds of things, because the father male influence on a daughter is a lot more needed when they're in these 12 to 17-year-old age group, because if they don't have access to their dads, or they're not put in a place of structure with more authority and that kind of deal, and they have a kind of a free for all at mom's house, they still need that male attention, and they're going to try to get it anywhere. You come across a lot of single mothers that let the daughter's boyfriends stay the night on weekends and this and that when they're like 16, 17 years old. She's in high school. Like, then it also turns into, and there's a lot more data on it and statistics, and it seems to be trending more because the system and the way that things sort of go is a lot more mothers have a lot more custody. And so that's just why there's a lot more data, or the dads move away, or they work all the time, and these things and those things. But you get a lot of the mini me is when women, and it's typically women that say, my mini me, and then they have a daughter that's dressed up identical to them. And it's just you're shaping them into being your best friend when they're old enough to do the things that you want to do with them. And so then you see it, 15-year-old daughter, 35-year-old mom going out to a concert or the fair or the carnival or these things that are, you know, but they're dressed identical, right? And so it's either the mom doesn't want to grow up or needs somebody that she can go do these things with because maybe she doesn't have any, because she's been single the whole time, or wants to, you know what I mean? But it's weird. It's a real weird dynamic that's sort of growing in the US especially.
I feel like there's a nuance here that's really premised in motivation. So, because even with 16-year-old daughters having a partner sleep the night, some parents might go, okay, well, they're going to do it anyway. I'd rather they do it in the home where they're safe, watchful eye, rather than themselves. But then the nuance there is, well, is there another male role model there to also look after them and to teach them what it is to be a man? And then in terms of the mini me's, because I know that some people might have a loving relationship, like a mother might have a loving relationship with her daughter and they just have some similarities. They enjoy spending time together. That's not the same as a daughter that feels like she's the emotional crutch to the mum, and the mum that then leans on her because she hasn't dealt with some of her own things and is molding her daughter to be her best friend because she's alone and using the daughter to
Right.
fill her void. And a daughter then doesn't necessarily feel the freedom to go out into the world and explore and develop her own identity because she feels responsible for taking care of her mum. And it's that latter one where they feel that responsibility that's the real challenge, because ideally as a parent you want to support your child to be the best version of themselves and to go out and explore the world and live to their fullest, and giving them the right structures and
Right.
supports. And that typically does require a dad and a mum. They are both so important, whether you're a little boy or a little girl. And so, because sometimes the problem is that mums get the majority of the custody, and we forget how vital the dad's influence is as well, especially when, girls go out into the world looking for a male role model in somebody else.
Well, and like we said earlier, your kids will start to, what you show them how life is what they're going to interpret how life is, right? And so, a son with a dad, typically a daughter with a mother, right? If a son watches his dad as a womanizer the whole time he's growing up, never settles down, has a different girlfriend every 2 weeks, da 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 da, there's a pretty good likelihood the kid's going to be the exact same way and never have an actual relationship and never get in a committed relationship and not know anything about communication, not know anything about intimacy, and not know anything about co-inhabiting with anybody else. Because as soon as the dad's girlfriend and the dad got in a fight about argument or disagreement, she's out, somebody else is in, right? Same thing with the mother teaching her daughter how to date, how to interact, what intimacy is, communication. Same, I mean, it's the same identical thing. If your daughter only sees you with a revolving door of men, or you see your dad with a revolving door of females your entire childhood, that's what you think adults do. And then you miss out. You miss out on a real relationship with a real person, and you don't know how to communicate, because as soon as there was a disagreement or communication failure, that person's out, new person's in, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to do the same thing with work and careers and jobs and schools and friends and relationships, because you disagree with me, you're out, somebody else is in. You want me to show up
Oh,
to work every day? No, I'm not doing that. I'll quit and go get this job, and then I'll quit and go get this job because my boss is mean to me or disagreed with me, or and that's
yeah.
and that's what you're teaching. Being aware of what you're showing your children, because you're the model and you should be the model, because TV is not going to show your kids what reality is, but you shouldn't
Yeah.
depend on TV or movies or music to shape your children's world view.
Oh, well, that would be problematic given the way that, especially for women, the way that social media and films and magazines shape what a woman needs to look like and act like and dress like. You really want them to get
Right.
some of the right foundations at home. And yes, you're right. The way that you parent and the way that you engage with the opposite sex teaches them how to interact with difficult situations in life. If you've just got a revolving door of people coming through your life, then you're not teaching them how to do conflict management, how to build resilience. It's, oh, I don't like this, I'm out the door. And equally, it's how you speak about your ex or their father or their mother in front of them. Because in a scenario where a mum is always talking badly about the dad and how he's good for nothing and is never here, and what you're essentially saying is men are good for nothing. Men are unreliable.
Mm-hmm.
Men can't be depended on. And that's what she would then take in as a little girl moving through life in her expectations of men and potential partners.
Right. And that kind of goes back into the pick your battles. My daughter's mother could have said anything about me, right? Around my daughter, to my daughter, even her family, it wouldn't matter. And I had a conversation years ago with my mom about it, because my mom was like, "Well, you know that they're probably talking about you when she's around, and this and that." And I was like, "You know what? I don't care, because I show up. What they're saying is contradicting what my daughter is seeing. Like, if they call, I'm there. If she
Yeah.
needs something, it's there. I'm here. When I have her, I'm present. When I'm supposed to be there, I am there. When I'm supposed to be there at this time, I'm there at this time." They can talk, but my actions are saying something completely different. And kids are perceptive, and people are
Yeah.
perceptive. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. Your actions are going to speak louder than words. And if, whatever they want
Absolutely.
to say is whatever they want to say. You can't control what other people say and think. But if what you're showing and how you're showing up isn't, you know what I mean? Like everybody's going to know who's just talking shit and who's really
Mm.
showing up and doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, because your actions are going to scream a lot louder than anybody else's words. And so you don't need to bring yourself down and get into those petty back and forth or even care, because
Yeah.
if it's not true, it doesn't matter. People are going to see that it's not true.
Yeah. Well, it ends up having the reverse effect, doesn't it? If you speak badly, if she was to speak badly about you and how you're unreliable, but then you continue to show up for every event and you're on time and you're always there, then it actually has the reverse effect in that she stops trusting her mum. Her mum's words mean less because they're in conflict with reality. And so you end up shooting yourself in the foot, really.
Right.
It's either there's an absent father and
Right.
speaking ill of him sets your daughter up poorly for healthy relationships, or you speak poorly of him, he is present, and your words become unreliable.
The more that you show up and the more that you're there, the less they're going to be able to talk about it, because you're proving them wrong. And nobody's going to want to sit there and continually be proved wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you got
And
the either
hopefully,
the husband or the wife, like the other person's a deadbeat, they never show up, but at every cheerleading, every football game for the cheerleading, dad's sitting there or mom's sitting there, like obviously they're going to stop saying it, because all the people that they're saying it to are going to sit, eventually be like, what, you're constantly saying that they're a deadbeat and they're a flake, but they're here every time, like what are you talking about? And then
yeah,
as other people start distance, when they start having to confront the fact that maybe they are the problem, they're going to change their behaviors, because nobody wants to be embarrassed. You know what I mean? Especially like in situations like that where you're painting somebody else to be this monster or villain or deadbeat or whatever the case may be. And everybody that's around you, unless you're completely delusional, which also happens, but you're going to stop because you're being proved wrong all the time, you know?
yeah. And it's not fun to be a broken record, especially when no one wants to listen. How do you then move? Because I imagine that the more that you show up, the better your relationship becomes with the ex anyway. So, how do you move from this space of where there's conflict, where there's pain, where it is you versus me, to going, okay, I've got to step out of this now and I've got to show up for my daughter and I've got to, there's no point suffering over nothing. So I will pick my battles, to then getting to a space where you go on holidays together.
I wish my situation was more common, but I mean, you know, obviously you start mixing in infidelity or drug abuse, alcohol abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, these other, you know, all these other aspects. But there is something to be said about civility, right? And like getting rid of the pettiness and being able to just be in the same area as the other person and those kinds of things. But it just takes time. I mean, nothing worth it's ever easy, and there's no quick get rich reality in the world. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it takes work and it takes effort, and the more you show up, the easier things get, and then it gets easier, and then it gets better, and then it gets easier, and then it gets better. And then the easier it gets and the better it gets, the longer you have these spans of easier and better and easier and better. And it just little by little, I mean, you're chipping at a piece of granite, making a sculpture, because it's not an overnight thing. It's not like we just woke up one morning and decided, oh, we're going to be peaceful with each other and everything's fine. And let's go start this new reality. You know what I mean? Like it
Oh
takes,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't.
it takes time, and same as everything else, every couple steps forward, you take a step back, and then you got to take a couple steps forward, and then you're going to trip. And made it a little easier because we were both on board for our daughter. You know, have both been good about putting our daughter first.
So was the idea of going on a holiday together, was that something that your daughter
Mm-hmm.
asked, or was that something that you and your ex came together and thought it would be good for her to see us together as a family and know that it's okay?
Probably a bit of both. It also gives us a chance to be able to go on a holiday with our daughter, but also still have time to ourselves during the holiday. And so it's not just a parenting vacation anymore. You can actually go and on a holiday or a vacation type deal and alternate nights whose room she's, with. And so then they can go to dinner and go out or do whatever they want to do and set up adult activities and recreations and go and see something that maybe my daughter wouldn't be interested in, and da, 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 da. But also I get that same amount of time too, where it's not just a kid's vacation and you're having to,
Okay.
you know what I mean? You still get some
Yeah.
adult time, which is nice, because then you're not trying to schedule in extra vacations in a year or save up for extra vacations or do all these extra, well, if you keep her this entire week, then I'm going to go do this. And then my daughter's going to be mad at me when I get back because I didn't take her.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And it also means that that doesn't mean that you're spending 24/7 together. It's you can
Mm-hmm.
still share the
Right.
time
Right.
whilst technically all being on that holiday together.
Mm-hmm.
So well done. I think it's
Well,
incredible what you've created.
I mean, it is. You get a room, and they have a room maybe in the same hotel, maybe one down the road or something, and really, there's the only difference is that you're in the same place. I mean, we live in the same town anyway, but you're just doing drop off and pickups every other day or every couple of days while you're on a holiday, rather than doing drop off and pickups in your hometown on whatever your schedule is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's not
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's no big deal if we all go out to dinner or go down and get breakfast or something like that all together, but it's not like a deal where they live their lives on a little bit more of a schedule than I do. And so I'm
Yeah.
I'm more of a whim kind of a person. And so, like, if you send me a text saying that you guys are going somewhere to eat lunch or something like that, and maybe, but I'm not figuring that out before we ever even leave by any means. Like, I'll get her at this time and drop her back off to you at this time, and that's about all the scheduling I get involved
Yeah.
with.
Yeah. So you still get to parent and show up the way that you want. You both
Right.
get to do it the way that suits your personalities, really. And even doing that on a holiday, I think it's amazing what you created. So thank you for sharing your story in some of those areas, because when you go through the end, I mean, the end of a relationship is hard enough as it is, but when children are
Right.
involved, it's a lot more challenging because, typically that means that person is in your life forever. You can't just walk
Right.
away as
Well, yeah,
easily,
I
certainly
mean,
not without ramifications.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so, I'm just rehashing some of the things that we've talked about. Typically when we're in a situation where we've gone through that breakup and that separation, that space of conflict is really because we're struggling in our own pain. We're in our own hurts and we're projecting them, and we think that everything is an attack, and it's definitely a me versus you, because you stop being on the same team. And really, to get to a place of collaboration, you have to remember that you're still a team, just in a different way. And that requires trust, and that requires respect, and that requires you to come together, because it's no longer just about you two. There's a child or children in the picture. And the risk is that if you don't show up for each other, that child then learns unhealthy representations of what it is to be in a relationship, or the kind of men or women that might attract. They then can lose their identity because they can't be their whole selves with mum or with dad, because mum doesn't like dad, and so they have to pretend they don't like dad either, and then they don't get to discover who they really are. And something that you said that was really potent is that the risk is that they think that you hate them because you hate dad and they're
Hmm.
50% dad. So you must hate half of them. And if we're not providing them the space to be their authentic selves, they can also run the risk of being your nurturer and your crutch and your emotional support, which becomes a mini version of you. And although sometimes that might feel nice, they also haven't become their own authentic self. And so moving into collaboration is changing your identity. It's about stepping out of the pity party to, okay, well, who do I want to be? And don't sweat the small stuff. If it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 seconds thinking about it.
Right.
stepping away from thinking everything is an attack and everything is about me. You don't have to engage in everything. I think you talked about, before it was chaos and you were pushing each other's buttons, and then you stepped into mindfulness where you realized you had a
Right.
choice. You had a choice in how you interpreted the messages that they may have been sending you. You had a choice into whether or not you engaged, whether or not
Right.
you went down that slippery slope of attacks. And by
Yeah.
shifting that identity, by shifting the way that you engage, it saved your own sanity. Instead of fighting for 4 days, there was no fight. And then you were able to come
Hmm.
together for your daughter. You were able to actually start co parenting in a healthy way. And to the point that you get to go on holidays together. I mean, not to say that everyone needs to go on holidays with their ex, but I think it's pretty beautiful that you can even get to that place and make those things happen.
Yeah.
And it shows that it's possible. Now, before we wrap this up, any one last thing that you want to share?
I think we covered most of it. I mean, really, it's just get out of your own head, get out of your own way, and quit sweating the small stuff. Like if it's if it's really not that important, you shouldn't put a lot of importance on it.
Which I know can sound easier said than done, but it takes little
Right.
steps and it's a process, and no one is saying it's going to happen overnight, and it's not about perfection. It can be, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but it's constantly going back to that belief and that mindset to actually move you through it. So thank you so much for joining me. It was amazing to have you, JP. And how can people get in contact with you? Because I know that this is what you do to support people going through challenging breakups and co-parenting.
Instagram's usually the best place. It's just my name. I don't do a lot of social media, so that's kind of where I direct everybody, and then they can reach out or send me a message if they got some questions or scenarios or anything like that going on, and I usually try to reply to everybody.
Amazing. All right. Well, I'll pop your Instagram details in the show notes so people know where they can reach you. And thank you again for joining me on this session
Perfect.
to help people move from conflict to collaboration in their breakups.